Welcome to episode 3 of Dom and Connor Talk About Stuff.
Thanks for joining.
All right, so today what we have for you is a segment on weight management. All right, we get this a lot. It's a super common goal, and it's a great goal to have. So when it comes to management, there's kind of 3 ways of looking at it. There's losing weight, there's gaining weight, and there's maintaining weight. Weight by itself, is a composition of what's carried within our bodies. That's fat, water, muscle, bowel, and your weight's going to be different from the morning than it is at night. So the idea is we want to help you reach your goal of weight loss, gain, maintenance, whatever it is, but also kind of teach you how the body works and what weight really means. We're also going to get into different kinds of, or different body types, and how weight is going to, or how your weight goals might be affected by that. Your build, your genetics, and things like that. We're going to get into kind of what people tend to expect, and then the secrets that Dom and I have to help you achieve the goal one way or another, whatever it is. And then we'll kind of get into a little bit of our experiences in weight. Dom is a bigger guy than I am, and so the two of us have had different weight journeys. But with all that said, that's just kind of what we got lined up for you today. Dom?
Yeah, so pretty much to kind of like kickstart the conversation off, kind of like what Connor was saying, is that so goal kind of comes in 3 different ways, either wanting to lose, gain, or maintain. In essence, with that as well, weight is a very relative term because there are many different types of weight, as if Connor described as well. A lot of times throughout the course of the day, there's going to be things that are going to change it throughout the course of the day as well, whether it's like through excretion, whether it's your diet, physical activity. There's a bunch of different things that can have implications to how much your weight may change by. Whether it's a good or a bad thing is kind of up to your wheelhouse in regards to what your overall goals are. But again, we're going to kind of discuss just lightly the different types of body types there are, because everybody and every body is different. Like Connor was saying, I'm a lot bigger in the sense that I have broader shoulders, I have wider hips. Someone like Connor, he's a little bit taller, he's a little bit more narrow and slender than I am, and that's just kind of how our body types are. A lot of that is tough just because through growing up, adaptation, whatever the case may be, there's a lot of things that are going to go into play as to how your body is going to adapt.
Right.
There's actually a rule, so there's actually a principle that it's pretty common. It's called the SAID principle. So SAID just means for specific adaptations to impose demands. Basically, it's just a big fancy term of saying is that your body is going to adapt to what you need it to do depending as to what you're doing, whether it be endo-biking and Spartan races or powerlifting competitions and rugby practices.
Now, to kind of move that into the losing, gain, and maintain, the way that changes. So the adaptations that you're going to impose are going to be based off what your goal is. So let's start with losing weight. Generally, if we want to look at it objectively, the number one way to lose weight is to create a caloric deficit, right?
Exactly.
And so you need to expend more calories in a day than you take in. And if we really kind of put the math into that for a moment, let's say, if you look on the back of any nutrition label, it's based off a 2,000 calorie a day diet, okay? And that's kind of what the American FDA is set as a standard. And so if you are taking in 2,000 calories a day, you need to be expending a minimum of 2,500 calories to create a 500 calorie deficit. Now, if we were to take that through the course of a week, you would 500 a day in a deficit, be in a deficit of 3,000 calories for that week. And 3,000 calories is roughly measured up to a pound of fat, meaning that if you continued at that rate, you could lose a pound of fat a week, okay? And that's a very steady and easily measured goal. Now,
it's a very healthy goal in a sense too, because a lot of times, depending as to what your weight loss goal may be, I think sometimes, not to kind of shoot anyone down, but people have a lot of realistic expectations that they can lose 5 or 10 pounds in the course of a week. Well, there's a couple things that go into that. What is it that you're losing? Is it water weight? Is it muscle tissue? Is it adipose? And is that a healthy enough rate that you're losing weight at? Because take into consideration too, like Connor was saying, like when you're in that much of a caloric deficit, all a calorie is just basically a unit of energy.
It's not an actual thing.
Exactly. So a lot of times when you're putting yourself into that deficit, it is very common to feel fatigued, a little under the weather, not feeling as up to strength as what you typically would be, because you're not essentially kind of giving your body the nutrients that it's used to taking in order to make sure that you have the calories in your system to not only go day to day, but to also make sure that you're staying in that deficit. There's a lot of background planning and science that does go into having to lose weight and just overall weight management.
And then you get into the nutrition of it. And so when you start losing that weight, you're going to start noticing differences. You could lose energy, but that usually comes along if you're doing it too much too fast.
Exactly.
So at the 500 calorie a day deficit, that's not really going to affect your energy levels. If anything, it could increase it, because the idea is you had to exert yourself more over that time period, which would likely be in the form of exercise. And that by itself is going to help your energy. The more weight you lose, the more stress there is on your body and your circulatory system as well. And so when we're looking at losing weight, you have that caloric deficit goal. Then, of course, you want to start looking into the quality of the foods that you're eating and how you're changing the habits and content of the food that it is you eat, and then the hydration, the amount of salt you come in. And then looking at this too, it's not a one size fits all by any means, and everyone might have a different dietary restriction. If you have an allergy, an intolerance, if it's a lifestyle choice like veganism or anything like that, there's always going to be kind of some different hurdles to get over in order to get to your goal. But there is always a way to do it. The amount of weight you lose in a given period of time is really going to come down to how consistent you are with the plan that has been built for you or that you developed on your own. And then that kind of goes to say for any weight management goal. Now, moving from losing to gaining, obviously the idea there is we don't necessarily want to gain negative weight. Sometimes we do need to put on a little bit of fat, because fat is actually a very important composition of the body, as it provides protection for our organs and insulation. But it's also a storage system.
It is. A lot of people, and it's tough too, because to kind of go off that, a lot of people think that by eating fat, it makes you fat. And that's just definitely not the case as well. There are such thing as healthy types of fats. So along with weight management, a lot of it is not to say that it doesn't all have to do with food and physical activity, but a majority of it is too, is just knowing the types of foods that you're putting into yourself. So a little bit of food science is involved, but just being educated enough to know that there are certain things that may get the perception of being bad for you, but in actuality they are good for you. So like for an example, I know a lot of people tend to kind of look at the keto diet's a really big popular thing. A lot of people will try to eat things like putting butter in their coffee and bacon grease and things like that. Like, don't get me wrong, yes, that's fat, but that's a non-healthy type of fat because it's loaded with saturated fat, trans fats, and things like that. Those fats are going to give you the higher cholesterol levels, heart issues down the line. It's going to put on a little bit more weight. Whereas if you try to focus on mono or polyunsaturated fats, those are all actually something called healthy fats, which I know it sounds very counterintuitive, but things like avocados, tree nuts, olive oils, things of that, different types of fish that have omegas. Those types of fats are also really good for overall heart health. It's good for your skin, hair, and nails. there's a lot of benefits that can come from mono unsaturated and poly unsaturated fats in comparison to like the typical butter, bacon, grease type of like fad keto style that people tend to gravitate towards.
And to that point, fat isn't bad, but too much of any one thing is.
Exactly.
So
good point.
When we're looking at gaining muscle, you want to create that caloric surplus. Okay, now it's on the other end of the spectrum. Generally, you want to try and aim for building muscle because muscle weighs more than fat. It's going to stabilize your joints. It's going to make you stronger. It can make you faster, make you healthier. And so the idea is your caloric surplus, you're eating more in a day than you're expending. However, you also still need to be exercising to create the demand in the muscle for the protein. If you are lifting heavy and you're creating those micro tears in your muscle fibers and then not giving anything to replenish that muscle, that's when you start to enter atrophy because now you're actually just destroying your body without fixing it after.
Exactly.
So it's a different process and it does take longer to build muscle than it does to burn fat. And it's a very tricky area to kind of balance that. Even in weight loss, you want your protein intake to be higher because generally the best way to create that caloric deficit outside of burning more than you eat is to do cardio because cardio is going to burn the most calories the fastest, right? Now, it's good to still have a dense portion of protein in your diet because as you start burning more fat and carbs, you're also going to burn a little bit of muscle protein. So keeping a little bit more protein in the diet, whether you're losing weight or gaining weight, is always going to be key. And there's a lot of different ways to get protein. It's not all in meats, and it's healthiest to have a variety of that. But finally, if we look into like maintenance is just trying to keep the train rolling, and it is probably the hardest thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Because your life is always going to be going in a different direction. Things are going to change. Budgets are going to change. Food availability is going to change. Stress is going to change. No one can necessarily maintain the same thing their whole life. And so what that comes down to at that point is adaptation. Maybe you're losing and gaining weight in a fluctuation period over your life. But the idea is to maintain a healthy lifestyle and one that allows you to live comfortably, safely, and healthily in a way that you are happy with. It doesn't need to be constantly gaining weight. It doesn't need to be constantly losing weight.
Yeah, and the thing is too, a lot of times with maintaining is that people may say that they want to weigh a specific amount, whether it's like 200 pounds or something in that realm. I've always found it a little bit easier and a little bit more just mentally friendly to try to give yourself a range as to like target weights to kind of help you maintain between, just because like
weights can fluctuate.
Yeah, exactly. Like Karan was saying, weights can fluctuate. So like a lot of times, I usually say within maybe like a 5, sometimes 10 pound range. Even 10 pounds is kind of a lot, but typically a 5 pound range, either above or below what you're typically comfortable with, is a good place to start, just so that way you can kind of get used to developing a routine to figure out, okay, if I have maybe certain types of foods, I'm going to be putting on more weight. A lot of times foods that are higher in salt may help you retain more water. That can help you put on weight. If you decide, a lot of times this goes in bodybuilding, that you kind of pull that salt out of your system, the water's not going to have as much storage to kind of like hold on to. So that may actually help you lose weight when you have lower sodium. So there are a lot of like little tips and tricks and things like that to kind of help fluctuate weight.
The water weight.
Exactly. So
and water weight also makes you kind of appear bloated. So what you see in the mirror, what you see on the scale, don't necessarily relate.
Exactly. So if you had tuned into one of our prior podcasts, we had actually talked about that we have a bioelectrical impedance scale, which basically helps you to differentiate what your total weight is and really try to help you break down the mechanics as to what your skeletal muscle is and what your adipose tissue percentage is. And the reason that's nice is because when someone says, oh, well, I'm overweight, I weigh 200 pounds. That 200 pounds can be a lot of different things. You can be 199 pounds of pure muscle and only 1% body fat. You can be 50-50. You can be 49-51. There's a bunch of different varieties as to what that number could comprise you of. So without knowing the true integrity as to what that number is, I usually always try to advise clients to just be a little bit more educated, because a a lot of times they could be beating themselves up over an issue that may not be as bad as to what the scale kind of perceives it to be.
Now let's also kind of turn that into the different body types that exist. No body is the same, but there are 3 types that are generally observed in like the fitness community. That is endomorph, ectomorph, and mesomorph. Now, the idea is genetics are going to play a role in this. Someone like Dom, how much do you weigh?
I'm like about 240.
240. So I could probably never reach 240 on a realistic scale. And it's because my joint structure, my bones, wouldn't be able to support that weight, whether it was muscle or fat. And I weigh about 165 right now. And so one way or another, if Dom wanted to get down to 165, he'd have to lose some muscle. And then that would make it so his body is now less stable. So I am more of an ectomorph, where I tend to have more of an endurance build. I work well with cardio and endurance, repetition ranges, and strength training. I also do a lot of training that stabilizes my joints, because since I have less muscle tissue and less tension in my tendons and ligaments, I'm actually very prone to injury, especially my wrists and my ankles. So I try to make sure that my lifting program is built around stability. And then when it comes to weight management, I need to generally eat more. And my fitness journey started with needing to build that weight. And someone in the endo range, Dom could probably describe it a little bit more from his point of view, but we'll get into like our lifestyle choices a little later. But let's describe what an endo would have to do to maintain their healthy.
Yeah, so a lot of times you typically want to consume. So you do have macronutrients. So for those of you that don't know what macros are, it's just pretty much your intake of carbs, fats, and proteins. Your micronutrients are going to be your smaller nutrients, so like your vitamins and minerals and things of that nature. So for the simplicity of the video with our macros, you want to try to genuinely have close to your body weight in kilograms in protein in grams. So I know that sounds very confusing. So basically what you do is you take your body weight, convert it to kilograms first, and then you can use that number to try to figure out as to how much protein you need per gram of kilogram body weight.
So what's the conversion there?
So typically you would take your weight and divide it by 2.2. So that will give you whatever your body weight's going to be in kilograms. And then essentially with your overall protein intake, depending as to what your main goal is, whether it's again adding, losing, maintaining, I typically like to say anywhere from like 0.7 to 1.2 grams per kilogram body weight is typically a good amount. If you're going to be on the bulking end of things or trying to put on more size, you're probably going to want to have a little bit of a higher protein intake. If you're more so in like the maintaining phase, probably like a gram of protein per gram of body weight is going to be a little bit more user friendly. If you're trying to necessarily lose weight, not necessarily saying you have to drop your protein, you can. That would just maybe entail having to maybe bump up your carbs and your fats a little bit, but you can also go a little bit under protein as well. And the reason that I say that too is because a lot of times with weight management, you can get into a variety of different topics. Like Connor mentioned too much of anything isn't good for you. That includes protein, fat, doesn't matter what it is, even vitamins. Too much of that could be not good for you. If someone does have too much protein in your system, that can lead to a lot of things. The reason that I kind of talk about this is just from personal experience. I actually went into renal failure. My kidneys were shot. I had too much protein kind of infiltrating my system. Basically, when protein breaks down in your body, one of the main nutrients is that it wants to try to pull its nitrogen in order to absorb that into your muscles. When your kidneys are not functioning to the capacity as to what they need to, your body's not going to be able to pull out all of those nutrients from protein. And whether that gets stored as excess or toxins, whatever the case is, there's a lot of complications that can come by having too much. So for an endomorph, a lot of times it's typically having to meet the calories that meet your basal metabolic rate. So all of that's a really big fancy term for is the baseline amount of calories that you need just to live. That's disregarding physical activity, overall goals. Like I need, let's say, 2,000 calories just to be alive. And whether I burn some off in exercise, whether I'm trying to lose, gain weight, it's all going to fluctuate. So a lot of times with an endomorph, we have a really easy time with putting on mass due to our size. Not to say that cardio isn't beneficial to us, but we definitely have a harder time trying to lose weight, for sure.
Well, because you have more to carry around, and mostly what that is muscle mass. Like your bone structure, your muscle mass is going to be a lot more dense, and so you can't necessarily get smaller, just like I can't necessarily get bigger, but we can change the composition within ourselves, and by balancing the macros and our intakes appropriate to what our body can stabilize, accept, and what helps us meet our what might be just be an appearance goal, like an aesthetic goal.
Yeah.
And then of course you have the mesos, who have both the best and worst worlds, where they can achieve either large size or a lean figure. However, they have to work very hard to balance whatever it is they're working on, because the body can go one way or the other very easily.
And a lot of people may not like those mesomorph people because to them it seems as though it comes very easy that they have the best of both worlds. Where someone like me and Connor that are kind of on two opposite ends,
Kind of stuck to our
kind of trying to get to that middle ground, it's going to be a lot tougher. So it is very easy to get frustrated when you see people kind of conquering those goals or kind of getting to those milestones a lot quicker than you. And I think that
which could be relative, though, depending on what their goals are versus yours.
Absolutely. I think it also kind of ties into a lot of things, too, that, like, in the weight management world and nutritional world, and just kind of how things kind of have come to this day and age, a lot of people look for the quick fixes, whether it be fad diets, fasting, different types of, like, detoxes, whatever the case may be. People don't want to actually have to take the time that it's going to entail to get from point A to point B.
There's also something that I have always kind of implemented with myself and with my clients, and I've always found it wildly successful, is the magic KISS principle, which for those of you who might not be familiar with that, it means keep it simple, stupid.
Yes.
The idea is if you overcomplicate things unnecessarily, like if there aren't any major restrictions, and you don't have any medical conditions that make it difficult to digest certain foods or anything like that, and you're otherwise in a position where you can just do the work, the best way to stay consistent is to have something that's maintainable and simple.
Basically, just build a plan.
Simple and easy are not the same thing. Weight loss is not easy, weight gain is not easy, but the way you do it, theoretically, could be simple. Exactly. For example, just take 500 calories off your daily expenditure. Pretty simple idea, not going to be easy to do. So that quick fix, the idea is we get some people that come in knowing exactly what they want. We get some people coming in who have never seen a gym before. And, their doctor is saying you need to get active or there will be medical repercussions. And some people come in because they're just tired of looking the way they do. And again, whether it's weight loss, gain, or anything regarding their aesthetic. And all of these reasons are incredibly valid. It doesn't matter. What matters is how healthy your goal is for you. Whether it's something that's just going to help you get over a period in your life, or if you're actually suffering from something that could be an underlying condition that is actually very common and is called body dysmorphia. Mm-hmm. We do see that, and it's very difficult.
It is.
And I've experienced it in the past too. It can be fleeting, it can be chronic. The idea is we'll never kind of see ourselves the way the person next to us sees us. Mm-hmm. And when you kind of multiply that by 100 and you start, picturing yourself in the mirror, the way your brain views yourself is so vastly different from the way you actually look. The way you're perceiving what you're seeing is actually a mistranslation. And that can be very hard. And so we do a lot of, talking and counseling with these clients and trying to help them understand where they're at numerically and get these numbers and kind of show them where they're at, what they can do, and what the healthiest thing or the healthiest pathway for them can be, and help them along the way. But even then, across the board, everyone would like a quick fix, but the quickest fix that we'll kind of get into comes from a small secret that Dom and I share. And it's really no secret at all, honestly.
Yeah, no, it's so to kind of even go off of the body dysmorphia thing, just to kind of touch up upon that really quick. It's tough because you do have people from all over the spectrum, whether they be too underweight, overweight, or even they're perfectly healthy as to where they're at. Weight is always going to perceive itself to be in different size, shapes, whatever the case may be. I have a lot of clients, even just personally, that some of them I've been working with for maybe 3-4 plus years now. Some of them haven't even so much as lost a pound. But in terms of the little things, how their clothes fit, their blood levels as to their overall lipids, cholesterol, blood pressure, all of those things have significantly improved just with being active with nutrition and exercise. And again, they may not have lost a single pound, but that's not something that you can physically see. I can't physically look at Connor and be like, oh, Connor's HDL levels are great and his blood pressure is excellent. It's a lot of there's a lot of things that physical activity and nutrition can do to help you change your body that may make it healthier, but may not necessarily cause that big physical, magical change that you're looking for.
Right. And that's always going to take time.
It definitely is.
So let's look into our, quote, secrets.
Yeah, so for the secrets that we kind of came up with, again, the quickest, easiest way to lose weight, follow these 3 tips. Tip number 1, have a plan. Kind of like what Connor was saying, whether you want to lose, gain, maintain, whatever the case is, start off just by saying, I have a goal. The goal is this. Okay, so you have a plan.
And that goal is measurable using kind of like that SMART principle.
Exactly. And okay, so now you have a goal. So what are we going to do to, almost like trying to solve a puzzle, plan out that goal? What's going to be the border of your plan? And what pieces are you going to put together in order to kind of get that plan rolling? Whether it's to see a dietitian, exercise, coaches, whatever the case may be. You got to figure out a plan that's going to be the most suitable and accommodating for you, because if it's not either of those things, there's just a lesser likelihood that you're going to want to do it. Which kind of leads into secret number 2.
Basically, with that, the way to look at having a plan is, what is the number 1 thing you need to put in to make the plan work? Effort.
So once you have the plan, I could very well give Connor. So side topic. So Connor is currently taking EMT courses right now. I could give Connor a piece of paper that says, this is everything that you need to know to be an EMT, to pass your test, get a job, everything, all on this sheet of paper here. If Connor doesn't read the paper and then apply what it says to the action plan as to that it's outlined on,
that's no effort.
Nothing's going to get accomplished.
Not going to get there.
And he's not going to be an EMT.
One of the things that it's probably one of the hardest things about the job, being a personal trainer, is it's getting people to really understand why they're trying to achieve their goal for themselves. And so when you're in the gym, we have control. Mm-hmm. Right? We can tell you exactly what you need to be doing. We can give you every answer under the sun because that's what you're paying for. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you leave our facility, we will do our best to motivate you. We'll do everything we can to help you stay disciplined. But at the end of the day, we are no longer in control. And it is all up to the amount of effort that you're able to put in, that you're willing to put in on your own time, unless you wanted to train with us 7 days a week, which by all means, go for it. But that's not always a feasible option.
I will say, so one thing that I usually tell my clients, my rugby players, things like that, is that in a matter of a week, you have 168 hours throughout the course of a week. So we typically run either half hour or an hour session here. If at minimum, let's say if you're even coming like twice a week for a half hour, right? That's about an hour's worth of your time a week training. You have still 167 hours of a week to get yourself to progress to your goal. Like I'm not, and again, by no means am I trying to shoot anyone in the foot, but if you're only putting in that 1 hour towards that goal out of 168 hours of your total week, two things. Either it's going to take you a hell of a lot longer to get to that ending finish line, or if you're doing things outside of here to kind of reverse the effects of doing the physical part, whether it be like your diet's not up to speed, not enough sleep, whatever the case may be.
You're running in a hamster wheel.
Exactly. And you're not going to be able to see that ongoing progress. So I usually tell people just, it's all about time management. Just you just got to learn how to utilize your time the best that you can. Which kind of brings us all into point number 3, which kind of entails everything, is consistency.
That's right.
Consistency is a big thing that over the last couple of years I really have tried to practice and preach to my clients. And the reason for that is that I have a lot of clients that will come in and they say, I feel tired, I'm unmotivated, I just don't see the point. A lot of times with motivation's an emotion. Emotions change. You could be happy, sad, angry, mad, whatever the case may be. They change constantly.
You'll never be motivated 100% all the time.
Exactly.
It's the back end of that.
Exactly. If you're consistent, even on those days that you don't necessarily feel motivated, you're still going to do what you need to do to get to that end goal because it's become part of your routine.
And the word for that isn't even necessarily consistency, it's discipline.
Yeah.
Consistency is built between the relationship of motivation and discipline. When one fails, the other has to kick in, and you need to be able to do both. And we're here to help you. For example, I've done things where I have my clients held accountable, so I will require them, I'll send an alarm on my phone to text them or expect a text from them with a picture of their treadmill work, okay? And I want that accountability. So on the days or weeks or months you're not feeling motivated for any exterior reasons that are happening in your life, you still have discipline, and we're here to help you with that. Whether it's motivation or the discipline and that you kind of struggle with, we're here to get you where you need to be. But between those two things is consistency. Being able to remind yourself what you're doing, why you're doing it, and why you're paying for it is ultimately going to help you get through the hurdles that are always going to be tossed at you through your life.
So as long as you have that outline of a plan and you put the effort into that plan, the hardest part is always getting started. Once you're started, it's no different than getting up and going to work, getting dressed, brushing your teeth. It just becomes a routine, and you kind of just do it without even having to think about it.
2 weeks of consistency in anything, and you'll have it.
Yeah, it makes a long habit. So to kind of, before we wrap up here, obviously we had talked about a little bit with the different types of body types between ectomorphs, mendomorphs, and things like that. In the body dysmorphia, we've kind of been jumping all over the place. There's a lot of different things that body types, weight management, body dysmorphia kind of all encompasses as a whole. Just to tell you a little bit of a personal experience about Connor and myself, from the endomorphs perspective, I always grew up having to be the bigger kid just because, whether it was in class, in gym, clothes not fitting me properly, having to shop at different places because I was a bigger guy. Growing up in endomorph, it was a really tough thing because people always question, like, well, why do you look different? Or kids are curious and things like that. Kids can be absolutely brutal, and it can kind of cause longer term effects.
Kids have no filter.
They don't. And as someone coming off as an endomorph, like, I definitely had a lot of extra adipose tissues in some areas. People would make fun of me in the sense that, like, one of my clothes, like, you could see my fat or whatever the case may be. My plan was, okay, I don't want to get bullied anymore. The effort, okay, one of my lifelong friends showed me what a gym was. The consistency, even on the days that I didn't feel motivated to go work out, I still went anyways because I knew that every time that I went to go work out, I'd always feel better by the time I'm done. And from an endomorph perspective, no, I didn't necessarily get skinnier or become an ectomorph. Even though I'm still an endo, my body composition has drastically changed. I'm no longer 50% body fat and 50% skeletal mass. I'm more like, I think the last time I checked, I was 25% body fat and 101 pounds of skeletal mass. So again, even though I'm still a bigger guy, my body type has totally changed. And that's kind of the big plan that I kind of put forward for myself to help me get through a lot of those challenges that I faced from my adolescent years and even into my adult years too. But from an ectomorph's perspective, I'm sure Connor probably has a different experience that he currently encountered.
So I'll tell you, when I started, when I was a kid, I was a picky eater. So that definitely didn't help. And because I was a picky eater, because I come from a very Irish family and we're all super skinny, it's like I always struggled being at even just a remotely healthy weight. I think in middle school, I was like 80 pounds. And it has taken years of consistent work to reach a healthy point now. But when I was a kid, even when I started eating more, I still had super skinny everything, skin and bones for arms. Kids used to come up to me, take their pinky and their thumb, wrap it around my wrist, call me anorexic. And that doesn't feel very good, but the idea is, kids are brutal. But later in my high school years, when in our first video we kind of mentioned how we got started and everything, so kind of referring back to that, a couple of my coworkers who are also really good friends of mine, and I decided to start going to the gym and just throw some weights around and see what we could do. And then they kind of fell off over time, but I saw meaning in it. I felt like I could actually change something, and we had at least those 2 weeks of consistency. And so at this point now, when I started putting weights in my hands, my plan was I need to eat, I need to lift, and that's all I'm gonna do. And I was maybe 17. I put everything I had into it. I had a couple different gym memberships, and because of the interest and the passion that was starting to build from it and the amount of change that I wanted, I was putting in the effort. And I surrounded myself with people once I got to college who were big into fitness and lifting, and then they helped me with consistency. They taught me things I didn't know. They showed me techniques I wasn't aware of. And I just added all of that into the library that helped me grow to the healthiest weight I've ever been at now, which is about 165. And so my composition has fluctuated over time. I've been as low as 9% body fat, and I think the highest I've been at is 18 or so. And so right now I'm working on playing like a happy medium in between. I don't have many aesthetic goals, but it's important for me to acknowledge that the majority of the weight that I put on was muscle, and it had to be. So it took about 10 years for me to finally get to a healthy range that would be accepted in a medical standard. 10 years of assessing what I ate, what I lifted, the type of fitness I did, my basal metabolic rate, and working around how much I had to eat and lift and balance in order to still come out on top, because it was very easy for me to lose energy with my body burning calories constantly all day, and being really active and working out in the gym. If I didn't eat what I needed to, I would get sick. And so that right there becomes its own challenge, is actually trying to keep up with yourself. And when you feel like you're not making progress, or when you're really tired and it takes so long to build that muscle mass from the ground up, it can be just as hard as someone trying to lose weight. Because at the end of the day, whatever image it is that you want to try and build for yourself, it needs to be done with a healthy relationship to yourself. you can't beat yourself up over just wanting to look a certain way. What's important is what happens beneath that tissue, how your body functions, how it's affecting your mental health, how it's affecting your circulation, your respiratory, and things that are actually just going to help your body function, your bone and joint health. So at the end of the day, you finally reach the goal, and then whether it was lose, gain, now the goal is always to just maintain. And as long as you have a plan that's constantly changing and evolving the way you are, you're putting in the effort, and you're working to stay as consistent as possible, you're going to get where you need to be.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us into the wrap-up of today's topics. So obviously with weight management, we kind of discussed a lot of different things from different types of body styles, body dysmorphia, nutritional sciences. So we definitely jumped a lot of different avenues with weight management because of how intricate that it can be. So with the wrap up, we had initially a couple of points on there, but I'm going to add a couple to it. So number one, work hard, or it's going to be hard, but you got to be harder in the sense that it's a lot easier to give up as opposed to it is to take a sec, reassess, and continue, whether it's having to adapt to the plan, modify things, or just trying to find that consistency within you in order to get to the long-term goal. So again, it may be hard, but you have to be harder. Number two is everybody and every body is different. So ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph doesn't really make a difference. Every body is different. So just because something worked for me doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for Connor and vice versa. The most important thing that you need to do is, like Connor mentioned, that I couldn't agree more, is find something that's suitable and accommodating, which is great. But at the end of the day, you have to be happy with yourself. If you're not happy with yourself in the sense as to like you're not enjoying the process or you're not happy with how you feel, then why are you doing it? And then the last thing, everyone wants the quick fixes. Connor's quick fix took him 10 years. My quick fix has taken me a lifetime. Since the time that I started lifting at 9 years old, I'm now 28, so 19 years. So it goes to show these quick fixes, you're not going to see that in a 90-second TikTok video or a 5-minute video on YouTube. It's just a matter of it coming full circle to have a plan, put the effort in, and stay consistent.
That's right.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's topics with Dom and Connor, and stay tuned for next week's podcast as we come up with more generative ideas. If you guys have any ideas for us, please feel free to either drop us a comment, subscribe, leave a message, whatever the case may be. You can also hit us up on both either our individual Instagram pages or just the Sheer Dominance page. And for those listening, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you tuning in. And thank you guys very much.